The alien world was quiet that evening. The sky was painted in deep purple with streaks of gold clouds floating slowly. The city below was alive with normal sounds. Merchants shouted in the markets, children ran between tall glass towers, and ships moved smoothly above the streets. Everything felt normal, calm, and safe. Nobody expected the sky to change. Nobody expected history to break open above their heads. The first sign came as a strange vibration. The ground trembled lightly as if a giant heartbeat echoed through the soil. People looked up, confused. There was no storm, no lightning, no reason for the air to shake. Then came the sound. It was not thunder. It was not an explosion. It was something deeper, something alive. It rolled across the sky like the growl of a beast too large to see. The crowd froze, heads tilted upward. Every eye stared at the heavens. At first, nothing. Then, high above the towers, the sky began to crack. It was not a natural crack. It was not clouds parting. It was like glass breaking, a black line cutting across the purple horizon. The line widened, glowing at the edges, stretching until it looked like the sky itself was being torn apart. A ripping sound followed, sharp and endless, a sound that no living ear had ever heard before. Mothers pulled their children close. Old priests dropped to their knees, whispering words of ancient prayers. For centuries they had spoken of old stories, of beings that once walked the stars, stories that were called myths. Now those myths were opening above them. From the tear came light, white and blinding. It spilled down like liquid fire, covering the towers, reflecting in the glass streets. For a moment the world was silent, holding its breath. Then the shape appeared. It was a ship. But no one had ever seen a ship like this. It moved slowly, heavy with power, its shadow spreading across the city like a dark hand. The vessel was massive, larger than any warship in the known fleets. Its surface was black metal scarred by burns and battles of ages past. Edges glowed with strange energy, humming with a rhythm older than the stars themselves. Every piece of its armor told a story of wars long forgotten. To the aliens below, it looked less like a machine and more like a god made of steel. The silence grew heavier. No engines roared. No weapons fired. The warship simply floated, steady and calm, as if it had all the time in the universe. The aliens felt small under its gaze, like insects staring at a predator. Whispers began to move through the crowd. It cannot be real. It is only a shadow. No, it is them, the old ones. The humans. The word spread like fire. Humans. A word from legend. A word feared and worshipped in equal measure. For generations, stories had spoken of a race that had once ruled the stars with unmatched strength. Stories of warships that could burn planets, soldiers who fought like demons, and voices that commanded empires. But the stories always ended the same way. Humans had vanished. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others said they had been banished beyond the edge of space. To most they were myths. But now the myth was descending. Across the planet alarms rang. Towers lit with red warning signals. Defense fleets prepared. Commanders shouted orders, desperate to make sense of the impossible. But none could deny what they saw. A human warship, alive and whole, drifting out of the sky as if the universe itself had opened a door. Children cried. Elders prayed. Soldiers gripped their weapons with shaking hands. Nobody dared to speak too loud. Nobody dared to move too fast. The warship remained silent, hovering, watching. Its shadow stretched across mountains, seas, and cities. The world felt trapped beneath it, as if time had stopped. Then came the light. From the belly of the warship, panels opened. Golden light poured downward, flooding the air. It was not an attack. It was not fire. It was something else, something harder to explain. The light was not hot, but it burned in the hearts of all who saw it. It carried weight, pressure, a silent message. Every being who looked into it felt the same thought in their mind. They have returned. The crowd gasped. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed. Others screamed and ran, their fear stronger than their reason. Leaders in the towers sent frantic signals to their fleets. But no fleet, no weapon could match the terror already planted in the hearts of their people. This was not just an enemy. This was the awakening of something old, something that had been sleeping beyond the stars. The tear in the sky began to close. The rift stitched itself shut, leaving only the warship behind. Darkness returned to the heavens, but it was not the same sky anymore. It felt different, heavier, as if it now belonged to the massive vessel watching over them. The world had changed. Everyone knew it. Every breath, every heartbeat carried the truth. The warship did not move. It simply waited, like a predator waiting for prey to run, or like a god waiting for worship. Silence wrapped around the planet once more, thicker than before. The people stood frozen, their lives split into two times, before the sky tore open and after. The sky had broken. The myths had walked out of the dark, and everything was about to change. The warship stayed above the alien world like a mountain in the sky. Hours passed, but the ship did not speak, did not fire, and did not move. Its silence was heavier than any weapon. It was the kind of silence that made hearts break because everyone knew what it meant. Power so great it did not need to prove itself. News traveled fast. Across the planet, across the system, across the stars, the story spread. The sky had torn open. A ship had emerged. A ship from legend. A human warship. On distant colonies, broadcasts showed the same images. A black vessel hanging like death above the alien city, its shadow stretching like an endless hand. Crowds gathered around screens. Some wept, some prayed. Some cursed their leaders for not preparing, but nobody doubted anymore. Humanity was real. Humanity had returned. In the halls of power, leaders gathered in panic. They sat in long chambers filled with glowing maps of the stars. Admirals, generals, and council members argued over what to do. Some demanded immediate attack, claiming no ship could stand against the combined strength of the Empire. Others whispered words they had never spoken aloud. Surrender. The debate grew louder. One alien general slammed his clawed fist on the table. Do you not see? This is a weapon from before our time. We cannot fight what we do not understand. But another rose, eyes burning with pride. We must fight. If we kneel today, we will kneel forever. Their words echoed across the chamber, but fear was stronger than pride. The stories of humans were too well known. Stories told of battles where whole fleets vanished in minutes, where planets burned and surrendered before the first shot. Nobody knew if those stories were true. But now, with the warship above them, the stories felt more like memory than myth. Out in the cities, the common people struggled with their fear. Markets were abandoned. Schools were empty. Families locked themselves inside their homes. Every child asked the same question: will they destroy us? Parents had no answer. Even the priests who once spoke with confidence trembled as they repeated their old prayers. The military, desperate to regain control, launched scout ships to study the intruder. Small vessels flew toward the human warship, scanning with bright beams of light. The scans showed something terrifying. The ship's armor was not only strong, it was alive. The surface shifted, repairing itself, erasing every mark of age. Weapons that had been hidden began to glow one by one, like sleeping eyes opening. The scouts quickly retreated, sending their data back to command. But the news brought no comfort. It only made the fear sharper. The warship was not broken. It was not weak. It was waiting. Somewhere deep in the Empire, old archives were opened. Historians searched ancient records, digging for truths that had been buried. They found fragments of old wars, dusty scrolls, broken data crystals. In them, they read of battles where humans fought entire coalitions and never lost. Of weapons so advanced they could cut through time and space. Of leaders who spoke with voices that bent empires to their will. The council tried to hide these records, but whispers always found their way into the streets. The people began to say the words no ruler wanted to hear: the gods have returned. In the stars, neighboring worlds watched with fear. Some prepared defenses, moving fleets into orbit. Others began to abandon their planets, fleeing into deep space. Nobody wanted to be the first target if the humans chose war. But the most terrifying thing was not what the humans did. It was what they did not do. The warship remained still. No message, no demand, no threat. Just silence. The longer it stayed, the heavier the fear grew. Soldiers started to break under the pressure. Some deserted their posts, leaving their stations empty. Others turned their weapons on themselves rather than face what was coming. In the highest tower of the capital, the supreme leader stood before a window, staring at the shadow above. His advisors spoke behind him, their voices filled with panic. We must act, they said. We must send a fleet. We must show strength. But the leader said nothing. He only watched, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. Deep inside, he knew the truth. There was no showing strength. Not against this. Then, without warning, the warship moved. The sound was like thunder rolling across the sky. Engines glowed. brighter than suns, and the vessel shifted slightly in orbit. The entire planet trembled. People screamed and fell to the ground. Cities shook as if the world itself was afraid, and then silence again. It had only moved a little, only changed its angle, but it was enough to send fear racing through every heart. The warship was alive. It was watching. It was waiting. In that moment, across the galaxy, one truth was clear. The age of myths was over. Humanity was no longer a story. Humanity was here, and nothing would ever be the same again. For 2 long days, the warship did nothing. It simply hung in the skies above the alien world, unmoving, silent and heavy like a shadow that never faded. The silence was torture. Armies stayed awake. Fleets circled the planet, and every living soul waited for the first move. But the first move did not come from the humans. It came from the aliens. Fear had turned to frustration. In the Great Council, voices clashed louder than before. Some demanded retreat. Others called for negotiation, but the proudest of them shouted for war. "If we do not strike now," one admiral roared, "then we admit we are already defeated." His words carried weight, and soon the council agreed. They would test the intruder. They would show their people that their fleet still held power. That same night, the sky filled with alien warships. Dozens rose from the atmosphere, their metal wings gleaming with green light. They formed a wall around the human vessel, their weapons locked and ready. On the ground below, people crowded rooftops to watch, their hearts beating like drums. Everyone knew this moment would decide their future. The first warning shot came as a single beam of plasma. It streaked across the heavens and struck the human warship's hull. The light flared for a second, sparks flying into space. And then, nothing. No damage, no sound, no reply. A second shot followed, then a third. Soon the sky was full of fire. Dozens of beams, missiles, and explosions rained down on the human ship. The night became brighter than day. Clouds burned away, and the stars disappeared behind the storm of weapons. The ground shook, cities trembled, and hope grew for a brief moment. Perhaps the legends were wrong. Perhaps this ghost ship was not as strong as the stories said. But when the fire stopped, the truth stood clear. The warship was still there, untouched. Its black armor glowed faintly, humming with energy. Not a single scratch marked its surface. The alien fleets froze, their weapons falling silent. In that silence, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, at last, the warship awakened. Panels along its sides slid open, revealing cannons larger than the alien battleships themselves. Blue light pulsed through glowing veins of metal, flowing toward the weapons. Engines roared like storms, shaking the very air. The ship turned slowly, not in anger, but in certainty, as if a sleeping beast had opened its eyes, and then it fired. The first shot was not a beam, but a sun. A blazing sphere of energy burst from the cannon and crossed the sky in a heartbeat. It struck the lead alien cruiser, and in an instant the cruiser was gone. Erased, turned to dust, leaving only a glowing hole in the sky. Screams filled the communication channels. The alien fleets panicked, turning and firing everything they had. Lasers, torpedoes, and energy bombs filled the heavens, but the warship moved through them like a mountain through rain. Weapons glanced off its shields, fading like candlelight against a storm. The warship fired again, and again. Each shot destroyed a ship instantly. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds, their wreckage burning as it fell into the planet's seas. The alien people below cried out as fire rained from the sky, the ocean glowing with falling debris. The warship did not slow. It did not hesitate. Its every strike was calm, precise, and unstoppable. In less than 10 minutes, half the alien fleet was gone. The survivors broke formation, their discipline shattered. Some fled into deep space, others dove toward the planet for cover. But there was no cover. Not from this. One commander, his voice shaking with despair, shouted into the comms, "It is true. The legends are true. We are nothing before them." His broadcast reached every corner of the planet, and fear turned to certainty. The humans were no myth. They were death itself. The warship did not pursue the fleeing ships. It simply stopped firing and returned to silence, hanging in the sky once more. The battle was over, though it had never truly been a battle at all. It was a lesson. On the ground, millions of eyes stared upward, broken by what they had seen. The people whispered the same words again and again. The gods of war have returned. Children clung to their parents, elders wept, and soldiers dropped their weapons in despair. There was no victory to hope for. The alien leaders tried to speak to their people to calm them, but even their voices trembled. They knew the truth. The humans had given them a warning, and it had been written in fire. If the warship had wished, the planet itself would already be ash. The only reason they were still alive was because the humans had allowed it, and that truth was worse than death. The battlefield was quiet again. The burning wreckage of alien ships still drifted across the sky like broken stars, their glowing pieces falling slowly into oceans and mountains. Smoke trailed through the atmosphere, casting long shadows over the cities below. Yet above all of this destruction, the human warship hovered in calm silence, its dark surface glowing faintly as if it had not even noticed the chaos it had caused. On the ground, silence ruled too. Crowds filled the streets, but no one spoke. They only stared at the massive vessel that had destroyed fleets in minutes. Soldiers who once stood proudly with their weapons now stood pale and still, gripping their rifles like useless sticks. The people waited not for another attack, but for something worse, an answer. Then it came. The warship's surface shifted. Panels opened, releasing a deep vibration that rolled across the planet. It was not an explosion. It was not a weapon. It was a voice. Every speaker, every screen, every comm system on the planet suddenly came alive. The same words echoed everywhere, in every ear, translated into every tongue. The voice was cold, steady, and heavy, like stone grinding against stone. It carried no emotion, no warmth, only power. This is not your war. This is humanity's return. The words froze the world. For generations, humans had been myths, stories of gods, demons, and forgotten rulers. But now those myths spoke, and their words were not of peace. They were not asking. They were declaring, "This world," the voice continued, "belongs to you no longer. You will step aside or you will fall. Humanity does not bargain. Humanity does not plead. We take what is ours." The people fell to their knees, some in worship, some in terror. Priests wept, repeating the words as prophecy. Leaders in their towers shouted into private comms, demanding answers. But their voices were weak against the sound that filled the stars. The broadcast did not stop with one planet. Across the galaxy, alien worlds received the same message. Fleets, colonies, stations, everywhere the word spread like thunder rolling across endless skies. Civilizations that had laughed at the idea of humans now trembled. Empires that believed themselves untouchable now felt fear in their bones. The alien council gathered again, their faces pale, their pride broken. No one shouted this time. No one spoke of victory. The silence in the chamber was heavier than the warship's shadow. Finally, one old counselor whispered the question that none wanted to say aloud. "What do we do now?" No one answered, because there was no answer. In the streets, people reacted in different ways. Some shouted that resistance was useless and that surrender was the only path. Others cried that they must fight to the last breath, that it was better to die than kneel. Families prepared to leave, hoping to escape into the void before the humans came for them, but no one could escape the truth. The humans were here, and there was no place to hide. Above the planet, the warship slowly rotated. Its cannons, still glowing faintly, turned like watchful eyes. Yet it did not fire again. It had no need to. Its voice had been enough. Across the galaxy, alliances formed overnight. Species that had once hated each other now spoke in secret, united by fear. Their fleets began to gather, hoping that together they might stand against this new power. But whispers spread through every meeting. Could anyone truly stand against the humans? On the alien world below, a child asked his mother, "Why do they return now?" The mother had no answer. She only held him close, her eyes fixed on the sky. The leaders tried to send a message back. They broadcast offers of peace, promises of alliance, desperate pleas for negotiation. But the warship did not answer. The silence after its message was worse than the message itself. It was like a wall of stone, unbreakable, uncaring. The people began to understand. The humans were not here to speak. They were not here to share. They were here to take. As the sun set, the warship's shadow stretched longer, covering the capital like a black curtain. Lights flickered on in the city, but none could match the glow of the ship's engines. It hovered like a god watching its worshippers, patient and eternal. That night, fear became prophecy. Across the galaxy, old songs were sung again. Songs that had not been spoken in centuries. Songs of the sleeping gods of war. Songs of humans who had once ruled the stars and would rule them again. Children were told the old legends as warnings, not stories. The people now understood that those legends had not ended. They had only been waiting. In the darkness of space, the warship's voice still echoed in memory. This is not your war. This is humanity's return. And with those words, the galaxy knew the truth. The future no longer belonged to them. The message of the human warship spread across the stars like fire across dry fields. No one could stop it, no one could deny it. Whole civilizations listened, their leaders silent, their people trembling. The words were simple, but their meaning was absolute. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. On the alien homeworld, the warship's shadow still covered the cities. Days passed, but it did not leave. It waited, unmoving, like a monument of steel and darkness. The silence was worse than any weapon. It made every breath heavy, every heartbeat sharp. The people no longer asked if the humans would attack. They only asked when. Fleets gathered in distant systems. Armies trained in hidden stations. Secret councils formed, bringing together species that had been enemies for centuries. They whispered plans, spoke of combined power, and dreamed of victory. But their eyes betrayed their fear. Every leader remembered the sight of fleets burning in minutes. Every soldier remembered the voice that had spoken to the galaxy with such cold certainty. Still, they tried. A coalition of 12 species united, building the largest fleet in history. Thousands of warships armed with weapons of every design moved toward the human vessel. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the greatest battle it had ever seen. On the ground, people filled temples and shrines. They lit fires and sang old songs, songs of gods and myths. Some begged for mercy, others begged for strength. But all of them knew the truth. Their fate would be decided above their heads in the cold silence of space. The day came. The alien fleet arrived, filling the skies with lights brighter than stars. Rows upon rows of ships surrounded the human warship, their weapons aimed and ready. The coalition's commanders sent messages across every channel. This is our galaxy. Leave or be destroyed. For the first time, the human warship moved with purpose. Its engines glowed brighter than suns, its cannons unfolded like wings of fire. But still it did not speak. There were no threats, no warnings, only silence. Then the battle began. The alien fleet opened fire, a storm of plasma, missiles, and beams. The night sky turned into a sea of explosions. Worlds below shook with the sound of war. People cried out, their eyes fixed on the heavens, praying for survival. The warship answered with a single strike. One cannon fired, and an entire row of ships vanished in a wave of light. Another fired, and dozens more fell, breaking apart into flaming wreckage. The human vessel moved with calm precision, its weapons tearing through fleets as if they were paper. The coalition fought with all its strength. Battleships sacrificed themselves, throwing their bodies into the path of human fire. Swarms of fighters dived again and again, only to vanish in seconds. The sky was filled with fire, but the human warship never slowed. Minutes turned to hours, but the result never changed. The alien fleet grew smaller, weaker, more desperate. Thousands of ships reduced to hundreds, then to dozens. Commanders screamed into comms, their orders turning into cries of despair. Soldiers abandoned formation, fleeing into the darkness. Some begged for mercy, but the human warship gave none. Finally, silence returned. The battlefield was nothing but drifting wreckage and broken lights. The greatest fleet the galaxy had ever built was gone. The human warship stood alone, untouched, its black surface glowing faintly as if it had only been tested, not challenged. On the ground below, the people wept, not in relief, but in surrender. They understood now. The humans were not enemies to be defeated. They were not allies to be bargained with. They were something greater, something inevitable. And then the sky tore open again. One rift became two. Two became 10. 10 became hundreds. Across the heavens, the same cracks appeared, glowing bright and wide. From each tier, more warships emerged. Giant vessels of black metal and burning light. They spread across the stars, their shadows falling on planets, their voices silent but louder than any weapon. The galaxy realized the truth in that moment. The ship above their world had only been the first. A messenger, a warning. Now the rest had come. In every corner of the galaxy, fear turned into prophecy. The myths were no longer myths. The sleeping gods of war had awakened. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had been waiting. And now everything had changed. The galaxy no longer belonged to the species who thought themselves rulers. It no longer belonged to empires or councils or alliances. It belonged to the humans, the ancient masters of war, who had returned to claim what was theirs. The last light of the alien fleet faded into the night, and the people stared upward, their voices small, their hope broken. They whispered the words that would echo for centuries. The age of humans has begun.